رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين، ولعنة الله الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Kindly recite salawat and move forward. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. Our topic, the rational foundations of Islam and a need to move back to the basics. Now, what we are trying to do is to understand, well, what is religion in its essence? And we will be using a variety of tools like essence and form to go through these lectures and understand how we address religion as it stands at present. But initially, what we need to understand is, how did the Prophet envisage his religion? What is religion for the Prophet? And what did it do for the Prophet and his community? The Prophet understood, well, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicated through the Prophet in a very realistic way. For a religion to be real, it has to be value yielding. It has to be meaningful. It has to have a purpose that sustains the human being and human life. Human curiosity, this multifaceted creature, must find substantive meaning within religion. It has to be something that pertains to human life in a very, very real, concrete way. It needs to satisfy the human needs and human aspirations. Religion has to be that force that condones the human yearning for completion and has to be able to fashion it in the best possible way that is there. Now, as we go into today's talk, as human beings, we know for a fact that unity is better than disunity. Religion should be that force that brings about and fosters unity. We know as a human community in a diverse world, in a pluralistic world, that coexistence, harmonious coexistence, is better than otherwise. Religion should not only condone this, but encourage it. We know for a fact that we need to be in a way that we learn through each other, a beautiful reciprocal relationship of appreciation and adding to human growth through human experience. Religion should not only condone this, but religion should encourage this. We know as human beings that we have huge amount of potential and we need to achieve this and arrive at it. Religion should not condone this, it should encourage this. You see, religion can never be a force that is inconsistent with the way in which our creation and existence is. Our creation and existence is one of inquiry, one of asking. Religion should promote this. Religion can never bar inquiry. The beautiful way we explained yesterday, the way in which the Prophet has formulated his faith, La ilah, there is no God. Question, you have a free hand. Adam was told, don't do this. He immediately goes and defies it. That is the nature with which me and you exist. Religion should be encouraging this nature, not trying to bar it. You see, unlike Christianity that had barred inquiry, Islam promotes inquiry. Islam actually encourages the rejection of God, because in the rejection of God is a rejection of a false idol created in the name of God. And that's why the definitions of God that we find in the Quran are the broadest definitions ever. If we were to define God as the giver of life, then in that case, man's mind will be barred from traveling, or would be barred from venturing down the avenue where he can give life. First and foremost, human growth will be curtailed. And secondly, if a human being were to give life, that would then bring the existence of God into question altogether. So Islam has never defined God in those limited ways. So religion, when we say back to basic and what was religion to the Prophet and the community of the Prophet, well, before we go into today's talk, we will just recap on what we said yesterday. Look at what the Prophet did for his community. A nomadic community, fragmented, involved in warfare, immorality was ripe and condoned, burying of daughters was seen as an absolute norm, exploitation by rich of the poor, cheating each other in transaction, these were the norms of life for them. Illiteracy, not knowing how to read, not having any concern for the other, being superstitious, having no security, having no self-confidence, worshipping idols upon idols, being involved in ceremonies beyond ceremonies that did not yield anything, to the extent that the Quran says, He took the burden of your shoulders. He broke the chains that shackled you. He freed you. He gave you wings. You were able to fly after that. Those people, he found them within 23 years. He brings them to a pedestal where they contribute to a glorious civilization. Imagine. From nomads to explorers, from illiterate people to the greatest literaries the world has produced, from people surrounded by two mighty empires to people whose empire dwarfed the Romans and the Persians together. The Prophet's attitude wasn't this, that it's a conspiracy of the Romans and the Persians to keep you the way you are. He wasn't concerned about that. He said to them, attain your true potential through religion. And they attained their true potential through religion to the extent that these mighty empires began to emulate them. Think about this. He did not say to them what the other has is questionable or evil. He said what the other has of the human experience is your heritage. Take it from them and advance it. So from the effects of his religion, we can see that there was something phenomenal, something grand, something quite great. Not only did he liberate them intellectually, but look at the moral status of these people after the Prophet had worked upon them. The people who lived and died for this world, if one person's horse consumed water before another person's horse, it would result in generations of vendettas. Those people began to give their lives for each other as opposed to taking each other's lives for mundane concerns. So from these effects, within 23 years, we can gauge that what he gave them was something that substantively contributed to the growth of human existence. Now, what was religion? We go back to that distinction: theology, morality, and ahkam. I dread to call it law, so we call it ahkam. Theology is the theoretical part of what he gave. It's the conceptual part. What he did was, he ignited the minds and the brains. And he said, look, that's that lofty purpose, that lofty goal where you belong. The whole of this universe, think about it, the Quran says again and again, think about all of this universe. Look at how meticulously, how balanced everything is. Surely there is a purpose in all of this. You were not brought here for you to eat and drink and die. There is something you need to attain, there is something you need to achieve. The first thing he did was, he ignited their mind into inquiry. He brought about that curiosity. He actually gave fuel to that already existing natural human curiosity as to what is happening. He did this first. And then what he did was, he made them question themselves. Now, why did he use these things? The fact is that human existence is not unlike any other existence. It's the same as existence at large. If you look at existence, and for those of you who have heard this humble slave before this day would know this thought, that every aspect of this universe of ours, this level of existence that me and you see, feel, have taken birth in, every aspect of this world of ours, by world I don't mean the earth, yes? By world, everything that we can conceive of, we can see, we can experience. Every single aspect of this world is on a unidirectional path towards self-liberation and self-realization. No sooner do you plant a seed that it begins its unidirectional journey towards accomplishment of its own potential and becomes a tree and becomes a fruit-bearing tree. No sooner as a child conceived within the womb, it begins its unidirectional journey towards becoming a fetus, towards becoming a baby, towards becoming a child, towards becoming an adult, towards becoming a grown person, towards becoming a moral, intellectual person, a moral person, and a spiritual person. Show me one aspect of this universe of God that defies this principle. There is no stagnation, there is no regression. It is nothing but a unidirectional evolutionary trend. Nothing but that. Observe anything in this universe and tell me what defies this golden principle and the property of existence. From the Big Bang, whether a black hole is spewing matter inside it or whether it can be likened to a seed, till now, what has the universe done, the physical universe? It has merely expanded and realized itself, hasn't it? Human existence is no different. Physically, we are realizing ourselves. Whatever was coded and enclosed in that DNA has got the space to evolve and reveal itself, to elaborate itself into fingers, hands, limbs, organs, eyes, ears, nose. Can you not see that? All of that is coded within our DNA. Similarly, there's an intellectual evolution. Our intellects want to defy every boundary. Do you not see this? They said, had God meant human beings to fly, He would have given them wings. They have created their own wings. Do you not see this? There is no stopping this intellectual progression and evolution and self-realization of the human mind. If God had meant for them to have daytime, He wouldn't have created night. We went out and created light. God did not create malaria, did not cure malaria. We cured it. We became the agents of God Himself. Imagine the intellectual progression of the human mind. Similarly, we want progression at the moral level. We want to become spiritual people. We want to progress all the time. We want to actualize the fullest potential that God has vested within us. There was a reason why the angels fell in prostration before us. There was a reason why we defied God's command. There was a reason why we asked and God taught us every single thing that He had to teach Adam. There is a reason for all these things. So human beings are following the same trend as any aspect of the universe. But the thing about the human being is, he is a loftier being, as we can observe. No mouse or monkey or a dolphin has taken to the moon yet, have they? But human beings have reached the moon, yes? No animal sits at the table of United Nations and says, poverty is a human calamity. It should be confined to the archives of history. No one should be poor. No one should go without a meal. No one should be without shelter. No one should be without medicine or medical. Every human being deserves education and to arrive at the fulfillment of their own potential. Every human being deserves to be a free man. No animal does this, only human being does this. There is something extra that the human being has. It is this consciousness, ability to understand right and wrong, this spiritual yearning, this being wanting to become a moral person. So the human being, not only does he complete himself in the physical sense, like every other aspect of the universe, the human being also wants to complete himself in terms of his intellectual being, in terms of his moral being, in terms of his spiritual being. This is where religion comes in. And this is where the Prophet formulated his religion in the best way possible, in line with the existential principle of self-liberation and self-realization. What the Prophet did was, in terms of human completion, not only the physical completion, but intellectual, moral, spiritual completion, what he did was he introduced Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into the equation. And he placed Allah at the helm of human aspiration. That whatever you're aspiring to be, whatever you want to achieve, and the fulfillment of the fullest of your potential is known as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the glorious end towards which you are striving. And that Allah becomes that force of encouragement. And He says, defy everything and become like me. And that is your journey. Allah says that, doesn't He? If you can go through the heavens, then do so. You will not do illa bis sultan, say with great authority. Doesn't Allah say, think about this. How does this happen? Doesn't Allah say, find any contradiction within the Quran? Doesn't Allah ignite the minds? Doesn't Allah challenge the minds? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore, in the prophetic understanding, forms the loftiest objective that is there that the human beings can reach. So contrary to other religions that have been perversed, Islam does not bar knowledge. Islam encourages free inquiry. Islam actually says that if you can defy God, then defy God Himself. The Quran says, bring another Quran if you can. Imagine the way God speaks to us. The Quran says, look at what I've created. See if there's any inconsistency in there. He actually encourages us to go and find out contradictions in whatever God says. Defy me. See if you can. By this way, He encourages that intellectual motion. So the Prophet places God at the helm of human existence. The peak of human aspiration is marked by God. But at the same time, He introduces God at a very intimate level of human belonging and human connection. He says to the human being, be connected with God intimately. Let Him be the force that drives you towards your completion. And that is what religion was all about for the Prophet in essence. Religion is based on that singular property of growth. We can't do anything but grow. The only reason tension occurs is when religion bars growth and we want to grow. Do you not see this? Religion, when it is perversed and it becomes inconsistent with the property of growth, that is when we find tensions within religion and in our human condition. We want to take flight and go to the moon. Religion says you can't pray namaz on the moon, so you can't go to the moon. Imagine. Do you know this? That this is in our fiqh. That we cannot remove ourselves of capacity. We cannot incapacitate ourselves of praying and fasting. So therefore you can't go to a place where you can't fast. You cannot incapacitate yourself. But the human will is to want to reach out to the moon. But if you go to the moon, you don't see the sun rising and sun setting, do you? You don't see the moon and the first of the month, so you can't fast and you can't pray. Of course you can fast and pray, but not in the way the fiqh understands it. But here you find that tension within religion and human aspiration. And therefore we find that religion is questioned. This was not the religion of the Prophet at all. The Prophet never wanted this. On the one hand, and I'm just saying to the Muslim mind, on the one hand the Muslim says Islam is global. On the other hand, the Muslims' Islam does not work for 3/3 of the world. If the Muslims' Islam is to be working, is to work properly, every Muslim should be confined in the Middle East. Islam should have never spread to other parts of the world. Forget about going to other parts of the universe. It should only stay in the Middle East. This is the reason why the tension begins. It's perversion of faith or misunderstanding of religion. The religion in its essence, the way Prophet understood it and conveyed it, was that God is at the helm of human aspiration. Whatever you want to become is absolute, and that is God, and He is yearning you, you're yearning Him. Islam encourages that. At the same time, God is introduced at the most intimate facet of human life, that devote yourselves to God and intimately through God grow. And that is the meaning of religion. So what is religion? Religion consists of God and human relation in line with the property of growth, in line with the facet of self-liberation and self-realization. So God intimately liberates the person, and God invites them to self-realize themselves, and at every point is encouraging them. This was the essence of the teaching of the Prophet at that theoretical level. Now, how did the Prophet go about it? The first thing the Prophet did through the Quran was, he knew by introducing these components, it would become very, very difficult for his community. So what did he do? He challenged their minds and deconstructed them, deconditioned them. These people were conditioned in a lifestyle just as me and you are, just as every other faith and religion is. What happens is, we have human flaws and frailties, and we will impose that on any system. I often say this, that we laugh at the Pharaoh, don't we? The Pharaoh felt that after his death, he will go on another journey, similar to this world, and therefore he will need his riches, his ark, his slaves. So what they did was they buried his gold and silver with him, and they killed many slaves, and they killed and placed them there, so that they may serve the Pharaoh in the onward journey. We laugh at the Pharaoh, don't we? We say, how mistaken could he be? But we are doing the same thing. Our understanding of sawab is the same thing. We pray 100 rakat namaz, don't we? And we feel that these 100 rakat salah will be placed inside a bag and will be brought inside our grave. This is Islamic Pharaohism, or whatever you want to, Pharaonic Islam. That's the Islam that we are practicing. That all the good deeds that I do will be put inside bags and brought to me. The prophetic Islam was something totally different. We have been able to bring back pagan sentiments within Islam itself. I'll give you at this point a particular story that Sa'di in his Gulistan or Bustan narrates. He says, and there's a reason why he says this. He says there was a man, there was a king with a slave. Their ship was wrecked. As their ship was wrecked, they found themselves on a small boat in the middle of an unending ocean. The slave was trembling through fear of the vastness of the ocean. What the king did was, he took the slave and dipped him inside the water and then pulled him out by the hair. Placed him on the little boat. The slave was still trembling in awe and fear. He did it again, did it a third time, until the slave began to realize the relative safety of the boat as opposed to the dangers of the ocean. What he was trying to convey here is that when we are existing within a system, we can't see its flaws. It takes an outsider who has a neutral perspective to actually challenge us and our minds about the flaws in which we exist. And that's the only way we can awaken. When we are caught up in systems, we are conditioned and hardwired to accept them as righteous, as truth, even though they are unproductive, they are stagnant, and they are regressive. But we can't see it. We just can't see it. I give this example of our Hindu brothers and sisters who are truly noble people. My experience with them have been that they're very, very godly people. But when I went to India and I saw them devoting themselves day in, day out, day upon day upon day upon day, And I said to myself, this is truly a waste of time, and a human opportunity is slipping away from them. They are so superstitiously devoting themselves to these deities, that they're not realizing that their lives are being chipped away at, and they will never get those days back. Then I looked within myself and said, but hold on, am I not doing the same thing? Is my Islam not merely a compilation of rituals upon rituals upon rituals? What am I doing? What is substantive in my Islam? Am I not just doing day in and day out, and at every moment and at every day something new is innovated and it becomes a part and parcel of my religion? What we're trying to say here is that the Prophet had a neutral perspective. He could see things that the people inside the system could not see. What he did initially was, he challenged them. He said, think about these things. Do they make sense within themselves? And the people immediately began to understand that actually no, these things do not make sense within themselves. Once he was able to come through this phase of challenging their minds, then what he did was he introduced a lofty purpose for human existence. And he based that great purpose on a real system of religion that made sense to them, that allowed them to fulfill themselves. And what was that basis? Those bases were the existential property of growth through self-realization and self-liberation. If you look at the Prophet's system and the Prophet's religion, it's phenomenal, it's simple, it's simplistic, and it's phenomenal. And we need to work at that. It was in sync with the human condition and the condition of existence. The Prophet said, La ikraha fid din. There is no coercion in religion. And that is the only universal you find within Islam. Lack of coercion. There is no coercion. Basically, what this means is there is a constant process of self-liberation and self-realization. There cannot be any coercion in religion whatsoever. The minds have to be free. The hearts have to be free. They have to reach out and yearn God and complete themselves. There cannot be coercion. On the contrary, there is encouragement for growth in religion. So that was the biggest fundamental, the most universal fundamental that the Prophet gave in line with the properties of existence. After that, he gave other fundamentals, which were not the absolute universal fundamentals, but were lesser ones. Now let's explain them, because they are relevant for our theme. He talked about the sacredness of life. Man qatala nafsa kaman qatala nasa jami'a. He who kills an individual has killed mankind as a whole. But this was not a fundamental lack of coercion, and I'll explain that in a moment, because we want to work towards intuition. Then he said, do not steal, speak the truth. Now, the reason why I'm saying that these are not the absolute fundamentals is because they can vary and they are relativistic. You see, when we said back to basic, we pointed this out 2 days ago. That which makes common sense, or that which is intuitively valid. When we say to somebody, you should not kill, they will ask, well, why should I not kill? Then they can intellectually come out with the answer that, well, we should not kill because killing is bad. But that's not the answer. The answer lies within the properties of existence, and it's intuitively derived. Why should we not kill? Why should we say the truth? Why should we not cheat? If you look at these propositions, you will see that speaking the truth, giving life, not cheating are prominent extensions of growth, self-realization, self-liberation, self-realization. Saying the truth is not good all the time. You know this, I know this. And that's why I lie most of the time from the pulpit. That's not true, by the way, Salawat. I just wanted to see if you're awake. If a madman comes here and says, where is Arif? And he has an axe in his hand, by all means lie. Lying is good at that point. Or shall we go through another one of Saadi's tales? and I believe this was a Khoja tale. Sadi says that the prisoner was brought to a king, and the king decided that the prisoner should be executed. The prisoner was speaking to the king and pleading for his life. And the king said, "No, I've decided, I'll put you to death." Now, the prisoner, when he became hopeless of life, he began to swear and curse at the king in his own language. Now, the king did not understand the language of the prisoner, and he did not know that he was cursing him and swearing at him with everything under the sun. Now, one of the wazirs, there were two wazirs who both understood the language of the prisoner. So the king turned to one of them, and he said, "Well, what is he saying?" So the wazir said, "He is praising your sense of justice, and he is singing your praise." The king was so pleased, he said, "I spare him his life. Let him live, don't kill him." The other wazir said, "But he was swearing and cursing." So he went to the king and he said, "Oh, great one, he wasn't praising you, he was actually cursing you," the filthiest words that he could have chosen. So the king looks at this wazir and he said, "A lie that brings about good is better than a truth that brings about destruction." What's the moral here? The moral is that truth and lie don't have any values in them. But saying the truth constitutes towards growth in most of the cases. And that's why we say truth is a fundamental property of growth. It's not a fundamental property of growth. It's by and large yielding growth. But it's not an absolute like lack of coercion. Can you see that? Are you understanding that? Truth by and large yields growth. But if we were to say we must say the truth all the time, there will be calamity. If somebody were to grab me as a prisoner and ask me the state secret, I will not say the truth. I am obliged not to say the truth at that point. Yes? If we were to say life is an absolute principle, give life, then nobody will defend themselves in the battlefield. These are relativistic. The absolute growth property was lack of coercion. That was the absolute one. The others were prominent growth properties. Now, when the Prophet fashioned his religion based on the properties of existence, it made immediate sense to his people. And they said, "Yes, this makes sense." Similarly, when he started fashioning his morality and his system, he came to the rights of individuals, the rights of the community. He said, individuals have rights, communities have rights. But the right of the community is greater than the right of individual because the collective destiny is more overpowering than individual destinies. People understood this, that in the whole body being well, it constitutes our own well-being. At one point, somebody came to the Prophet and said, "Ya Rasulullah, why can't I do as I will? Why should the will of the community bar my freedom of will?" He said, "Imagine if we were all sitting inside a boat. You have bought your seat, and you have the right to sit there and do whatever you want. Now imagine if you started making a hole in the place where you sit, and you say, 'It's my place, and I have freedom to exercise my will.' What would happen?" He said, "The rest of them would stop me, because through my exercise of free will, everybody else would drown and suffer." He said, that's the nature of individual and communal existence. These are the rights. And he formulated them in accordance with the property of self-liberation, self-realization of existence, and people made sense of it. They said yes. And immediately he introduced this whole notion through his system of religion of steady, beautiful growth and self-realization. And therefore he said, learning a word is better than namaz. Did he not say that? Did he not say that spending time in a scholarly discussion is better than 70 years of worship in which every night you stand in namaz and every day you fast? He said this because that is in line with that self-realization. And he said, your prayers are valid to the extent to which they make you into good people, otherwise they are not valid. Every bit of his religion was based on the central theme of growth property. That's it. But connected intimately with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the human being is a loftier being. He needs that spiritual evolution as well. If you look at the religion of the Prophet, he did away with all superficiality. He would not withstand ceremonies that did not make sense. He would say these are distractions. People would see crows and they would take a bad omen from it. He would say, use Allah to override it. He said, say la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and go and do what you have to do. The Quran says, إِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. When you are resolved and trust in Allah, leave the consequence of whatever you're doing to God. That is the higher principle. Do your best and trust in God, because you are evolving and reaching out to God. If Allah gives you success, He's taking you to Himself. If Allah gives you defeat and failure, He's taking you to Himself. And Allah says this so clearly in the Quran. He says, look, if you were to die in a battle, or you were to be killed in the process, then you're returning to Allah. Isn't that better for you than winning the war of the world? He said, why do you frown so much just because you lost a battle? Even if you lose a battle, you're coming to me through your sincere intentions. It was all about growth. The Prophet gave that religion, and he gave a yardstick, and he said anything defying growth, anything causing you stagnation is something that needs to be looked at very, very critically. And the people felt a sense of liberation. What he did was he liberated people. He gave them confidence in their own humanity. He gave them confidence in their God. He said, the moon, the stars are yours to take. Take them. This universe is yours. Take it all. He gave them that much encouragement. On top of that, he said to them that spiritually your status is so high that these angels fall in prostration in front of you. Realize yourself. And God became the promoter of growth, and He gave audacity to His people. And He said, every tradition that is counterproductive, reject it. Of course, I want to talk about this later on, but I just need to point this out, as the time is finishing now. In the Quran, the people who were preparing for pilgrimage, the pagans, they would not enter their houses from the front door, but as a gesture of respect, they would enter their houses from the rear door. Allah says there is no good in entering your houses from the rear door. There is no piety in there. It's a useless exercise. Enter your houses from the front door and go for pilgrimage. Can you see that? Look at the beautiful way in which the growth properties are promoted and all the wastefulness is taken out. People were liberated. They were told to make decisions and have confidence in their own selves. They were told that the yardstick of success is for you to evolve and for you to grow. Allah says it so clearly that when you sacrifice the animals, neither the meat, nor the blood, nor the flesh, none of it is reaching Allah. What reaches Allah is the goodness of your heart with which you conduct that exercise. How spiritually refined you become. That was the religion that the Prophet gave. Now I'm just going to summarize this again. The Prophet brought his religion in line with that singular property of existence, which is what? Self-liberation and self-realization. But because a human being is a very sophisticated being, he is an emotional being, rational being, spiritual being, the Prophet introduced God at the helm of human aspiration. And the Prophet introduced God as an intimate force driving human towards completion. That is known as the devotion of human being towards God in the process of spiritual and moral evolution together with intellectual evolution. And the way he did it was that he challenged the minds. After challenging the minds, then he gives his alternative based on the property of growth, in which the salient property, the uncompromised property, is lack of coercion. Now you might say, we coerce our children, we coerce society. We said, yes, those coercions are there to increase freedom. Those instances are there. But everything falls below the lack of coercion. And this is how he shaped his religion. And the thing that he did in that process was removed everything that was wasteful, and he challenged them. And they had the audacity to remove whatever was wasteful. This is exactly what we find in the lives of our imams. Now I want to talk about this tomorrow, but I'll just gesture at this. When the sixth Imam, by the way, all the four Sunni Imams were students of Imam Sadiq and Imam Baqir, yes? Three of them were direct students and one of them was indirect student. They had the utmost respect for these Imams. There isn't that conflict that is there in our minds. That is due to the lack of our understanding of history, because we don't read. The only confusion goes in our head. Abu Hanifa changed himself totally after meeting with Baqir and Sadiq salamullah alayhima. But in any case, Imam Sadiq met with Abu Hanifa. And he said to Abu Hanifa, I hear you become a great scholar. He said, yes. He said, well, how do you eat? He said, well, I eat with 2 fingers and thumb. I take a small morsel, I chew it, and then when it becomes liquid, as I said, I don't want to talk about this now, just to gesture. And then I saw it. The Imam said, well, you don't know how to eat. He said, what do you mean? He said, look, what you're talking about is not what the Prophet did. Imam Abu Hanifa said, look, this is how the Prophet ate. Now imagine, he is saying this is how the Prophet ate. And the Imam responded, well, you don't know how to eat. The Imam had audacity to say this, right? So he said, what do you mean? He said, look, before you eat with 2 fingers and a thumb, and you chew the morsel until it becomes liquid, you should know that whatever you're eating is lawful for you. It's not cheated and earned through illegal means. It is not displeasing to God. What you're talking about is a form, but there is an essence there that you're forgetting. The essence is that is it pleasing to God for you to chew this morsel in the first place? He said, if it is pleasing to God, then it is very secondary whether you take a fistful of food and gulp it down your mouth, chew it or not chew it. He said, what you're eating, if that is displeasing to God, then what difference does it make whether you eat with 2 fingers and chew it or you don't chew it? That is the essence towards which the Imams were pointing at all times. What me and you, my dear brothers, are left with are forms that have come into religion and are totally devoid and deprived of any essence. Hussein ibn Ali salamullah alayhi is intercepted by Hur, and he is led in a different direction. In fact, Imam Hussein asked his companions about the direction, and they said, look, the banks of Euphrates are in this place. So Imam Hussein takes that direction. As he is going in that direction, his steed stops and refuses to move. The narration states that the Imam spurred his steed, but he would not move. He changes 3 steeds. When they refuse to move, he consults Zuhair. He asks Zuhair, he said, you are acquainted and familiar with this area. What is the name of this area? Zuhair said, O son of the Prophet, this is known as Shattul Furat, the banks of the Euphrates. The Imam said, does it have any other name? He said, yes, it is known as Nay Nawa. The Imam said, does it go by any other name? He said, yes, Karb and Bala, tribulation and trial. The Imam said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from Karb and Bala. Then he descended from his steed, took his spear and embedded it firmly within the land. And he said, Wallahi, by Allah, inna ha huna manakhu rikabina. This is the place where our horses shall rest. Wa mahattu rihalina, a place where our tents will be pitched. Wa masfiku dima'ana, and a place where our blood will be spilled. He was conversing, and Fizza, according to Zakirin, came running to Imam Hussein. Your sister summons you, Kulthum. Imam Hussein comes to Kulthum. She says, oh brother, what land is this? My heart is gripped with fear and anxiety. I find no rest. Oh sister, your brother has arrived at his destiny. This is the appointed place that I was told of. My father was on this land as me and Al-Hassan accompanied him. He rested at this land momentarily and placed his head in the lap of Al-Hassan. He awoke abruptly and began to weep. We asked, oh father, what be the cause of your tears? He said, I slept and I saw a dream. that there was a pool of blood and Al-Hussein was drowning in that blood and calling out for help, and nobody was assisting him. Then he turned to me and said, "Oh Hussein, what shall you do when you meet with such fate?" I said to him, "Oh Father, I shall endure it for the sake of Allah." And my father commended me. "Oh sister, your brother has come to the end of his journey." Imam Hussein asked, "Whose land is this? To whom does it belong?" They said, "It belongs to the clan of the sons of Asad." He said, "Call them." They were called. He said, "Oh people, I want to purchase certain area of this land." They said, "Oh son of the Prophet, it is yours." He said, "Nay, I shall purchase it from you." And he purchased it with a price. He said, "Now, I give back this land to you, but with a condition." And they said, "Oh grandson of Prophet, name it." He said, "I shall be killed here. If you can, then come and assist me. If you can't, then after I have been killed, if my body is barren and unburied, come and bury me. If people come to visit me, show them my grave. And when people come here, give them water to drink and host them." It is said by the Zakirin that when the man of Bani Asad left, he asked for their women to come. And he said to their women, "If your man, out of fear of Ibn Sa'ad and Ibn Ziyad, do not bury us, when you come to take water, come and throw dust upon our bodies and bury us." The Zakirin go further. After talking with the women, he spoke with the children. And he said, "Oh children, if your mothers and fathers cannot come here, then as you play, throw dust upon us." The battle commences. Hussein's faithful are losing their lives. There is a noble known as Muslim ibn Awsaja. Muslim is a lover of Hussein. Muslim falls to the ground. Hussein together with Habib rush to the body of Muslim. Hussein takes the head of Muslim into his lap. And Habib looks at Muslim and he says, "Oh Muslim, even though I am soon to join you, do you have any last request that I can fulfill in the short duration of life that I have after you?" Muslim raised his trembling hand and pointed his finger and gestured towards Hussein. And he said, "Habib, alayka bihada shakhs ma dumta hayya." Habib, guard this man with your life for as long as God gives you life. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. مات حسين.